Ever wonder how points and miles experts book flights like these for just a few $100s and points? Today, I'm pulling back the curtains and walking you through a recent real redemption I made for later this year. And this isn't just a basic redemption or a high-level overview. I'm talking business class across multiple cities for 3 people, pretty much doing this on hard mode. But that means I get to share every single step, mistake, tricks, which there are a lot of, and tools I used so you can see exactly how it's done and adapt it to your own travel goals, since all the strategies today apply no matter where you're headed. Now, real quick, and everyone's different, but what's my personal strategy for racking up points for trips like these? I usually take fewer but bigger trips, mostly international and rarely solo. I'm often booking for 2 or more people per trip and have flown 4 people in business class all on the same flight twice, which also means I need a fair amount of points just ready to go. And here's what works for me. First, I always try to carry 2 to 3 cards that can earn me upwards of 3 points per dollar spent in some key categories, like with the Citi Strata Premier and the Chase Sapphire Preferred. And with most of my spend going to food and travel, that can add up real fast, with a solid 2 times catch-all card rounding it out. Second, I try to time my welcome bonuses. Now, I'm not always working towards one, so I don't need to think about it all the time, but when I know I have a big trip coming up or a big expense, I try to line one up so I'm getting solid return on that spend. And third, I pretty much only go for cards earning me flexible points. I'm fully team travel redemptions and travel partners, so having options on where my points end up going is key. That's why my most recent card was the Citi Strata Premier, given I've tapped out on all the good flexible point cards across Chase, American Express, and Capital One, so Citi was just next. And a big mistake was, had I picked this card up earlier, I could have saved a ton on a flight that we'll cover later in this video. Bottom line, earning lots of points does not have to be complicated. Just play it smart and stack up value where it counts. Focus on that 20% of your effort that will lead to 80% of the value. Now, once we've got the points, the next key step is having a plan and being flexible, which is kind of a running theme here. For this trip, I knew I wanted to go to Australia to visit family while also having a stop in Taiwan, as it's my parents' honeymoon spot that they haven't visited since, so why not? And given the weather, sometime in the fall would be a perfect time. I always try to visit at least 2 places if I'm going far, especially if I'm already going to be crossing the Pacific Ocean. Though in this case, those 2 countries are quite far from each other, but the point still stands. Award flights across the Pacific are usually much harder to find than within Asia, so it's not actually that much more work either. The bonus is that more destinations will open up more routing options, which actually increases your chances of finding award availability, something that's already tough when booking for 2 people, let alone 3. Another tip I usually follow is to stay open for different departure cities. My home airport is SeaTac, but I wouldn't mind doing a short drive up to Vancouver or booking a cheap repositioning flight down to California. Being flexible in your dates and both your origin and destination cities is honestly one of the most powerful advantages you can give yourself, because unlike cash, award tickets are limited, and the more wiggle room you can give yourself, the more likely you'll find something that works for you. From there, I don't need to lock in exactly how I fly just yet. I'll let the availability guide me, and as deals come up, I can piece together my trip booking different segments in different ways. Now that I had a rough plan in place, it was time for the fun part, actually finding that availability. And for that, my go-to tool is Seastar. Not sponsored, just incredibly useful. The tool let me plug in multiple departure cities like Seattle, Vancouver, and others, using the multi-city code WST, and search across major cities in Australia and Asia, like Sydney, Melbourne, Tokyo, Seoul, Taipei, Singapore, and more. At the same time, I also set up alerts for these routes, but honestly, these haven't been that reliable as they don't seem to be firing right away. So unfortunately, I just fall back on manually doing a search through a bookmark for 1 or 2 minutes a day instead of waiting for an alert. And pro tip, instead of only searching for your exact date range, search the same routes for 1 to 2 months out from today. That way you can see if more award space will open up as your date closes in. This has helped me notice patterns which aren't always guaranteed, but just gives you more confidence on what may come up. In doing so, I realized that finding flights direct to Australia was going to be tough. Barely any non-stop routes and almost no availability. So I pivoted and instead started focusing on different cities in Asia first, and then later routing from there down to Australia. Remember, availability within regions like Asia or Australia are much easier to come by than across the Pacific. Now, before diving into the exact routing and flights that I booked, it's worth mentioning these couple tips that I never hear anyone talk about, but can really make or break the quality and experience of your trip. First, choose your airlines wisely. They're not all created equal. Luckily, Asia is home to some of the best airlines in the world. ANA, EVA, Singapore Airlines, even Asiana, all of which fly the routes I was looking at. And when compared to domestic US airlines, it's a night and day difference. But even within the same airline, the cabins may vary. Take EVA for example. Sometimes they fly their older, narrower business class seat, but sometimes their newer, wider seats, which is like the top 1 or 2 experiences that I've had. Yes, both those seats are still lie flat, but if you take this a step further, sometimes the same airline and same route will actually have different seats. Like when I was flying Air Canada to and from Toronto or Montreal, most flights were just narrow body and regular recliners, but a few times a day they would fly their wide body jets with their full lie flat seats. And for the same amount of points, I'm sure almost all of you will pick one over the other. Second, the actual aircraft flown matters as well. Not only because there's those narrow bodies with recliners versus wide bodies with lie flat seats, but because the newer, more modern planes like the A350 or the 787 will actually make you feel better. They're pressurized to a lower altitude and have higher humidity in the air, which will literally help fatigue and jet lag. I felt this firsthand when I flew United Polaris on their older 777-200 aircraft, which felt noticeably more dated and dry compared to all other business class experiences I've had. Bottom line, both the airline and aircraft that you'll be flying matters. So take a few minutes to search up what experience you'll be getting, because that can mean a night and day difference for your trip. Alright, so after regularly searching for a while, which again is only like a couple minutes a day, something did finally pop up. Seattle to Singapore in business class and on Singapore Airlines, one of my favorite carriers and an airline I flew a couple years ago that completely lived up to the hype. Not only was the flight an amazing experience, but Singapore is just that destination that we're always happy to stop by. Compact, easy to get around, amazing food, and surprisingly affordable for what you get. Even better, the redemption was a solid 87,500 Aeroplan points and about $80 per person. Cash price, $32.62, which works out to around 3.64 cents per point, though realistically, I wouldn't pay that full cash fare, but it's still some excellent value. Only problem, there were only 2 seats booking through Aeroplan, and we need 3. So what now? Well, here's a pro tip I use, which is that you can sometimes book the exact flight on different programs with different availability. Hear me out. Singapore Airlines, for example, releases some of their award space to partners like Aeroplan, but holds back more for their own KrisFlyer program, where you can transfer points to from Chase, American Express, Capital One, or Citi. When I searched the same flight on KrisFlyer, boom, the exact same flight was there for 107,500 miles and $52 in fees. Yes, it costs more in points, but when averaged across 3 people, the total cost is still solid value. The thing is, there's always risk. If I book the Aeroplan seats, then the KrisFlyer ones might disappear. But here's how I managed that risk. First, I checked that on KrisFlyer, it was showing that same Savor award space no matter if I searched 3, 4, or even 5 people. That gave me some confidence that there were still plenty of Savor availability. Second, on the Aeroplan side, I would have a 24-hour buffer where I can cancel and get a full refund, so I knew I could back out if I needed to. And third, I made sure I could transfer my points quickly. Amex to KrisFlyer KrisFlyer is usually instant, but Chase or Capital One seem to take anywhere from 1 to 2 days, so Amex was the play. So I took the risk and transferred my Chase points over to Aeroplan, which fortunately also had a 20% bonus at that time, meaning only 73,000 Chase points, and then Amex over to KrisFlyer. As it turned out, all 5 seats were still available on KrisFlyer even after I booked the 2 seats on Aeroplan, which strongly suggests that both of these programs pull from a different pool of award space. A good data point to keep in mind, but let me know below if you've had a different experience. Okay, that was a lot, but that means up until now, we spent about 146,000 Chase points, 107,500 American Express points, and about $212 in fees total, giving me an average of about 3.78 cents per point, though again realistically a bit lower, but still a solid redemption. And I wasn't done yet. We were still just in Singapore and we needed to get to Taiwan and Australia. And here's where another pro tip comes in, and that's using the Aeroplan stopover rule. For just 5,000 more points, you can add a stopover city to your one-way award. So I searched Starline's flights between Singapore and Taiwan and found availability on EVA, another incredible airline for 2 people. So when booking on Aeroplan, I actually combined this all together, making it Seattle to Singapore, then an extra 5-hour flight over to Taipei, all in business class for just 92,500 Aeroplan points. But again, that's only 2 tickets. I needed 1 more. So I went back to that other pro tip around multiple programs, in this case using EVA's own Infinity Mileage Lands program. Their Intra-Asia award chart is great, in this case costing just 25,000 miles. And as is common, airlines themselves will reserve more availability for their own programs. And so I transferred my Capital One miles over to EVA at a 2 to 1.5 rate, meaning I needed 33,333 Capital One miles and about $90 for this redemption. And here's the mistake I mentioned earlier. Had I gotten my Citi Strata Premier card earlier and those thank you points, I could have transferred them at a 1 to 1 rate instead of 2 to 1.5 that Capital One requires, which would only cost me 25,000 points, which is not the end of the world, but still unfortunate. And so with that done, and flying 3 people in business class between Seattle to Singapore and Taipei cost me in total 155,000 Chase points, 107,500 Amex points, around 33,000 Capital One miles, and $300 or so in taxes and fees total. All on 2 of the best airlines in the world, while averaging me around 4 cents per point, but again, not over-indexing on that value too much. Even if it was 3 or high 2s, I would still be happy. And the best part, that was just the first portion of the trip. Now that we would be in Taipei, we need a way to get down to Australia. Naturally, my first instinct was to book this leg with points as well, but this is where things got really tough. I looked for non-stop award availability on China Airlines and EVA, the only 2 airlines that fly direct between those 2 countries, and found nothing. And unfortunately, the one-way cash fares, which is exactly what I needed, was over $2,000 per ticket, which was not ideal. Only when checking KrisFlyer did I find a decent deal, which is flying Taipei through Singapore again over to Melbourne for 71,500 miles and about $50 in fees. Not bad, but not the greatest either. And that's where this next pro tip comes in, something I mentioned in my how to never pay full price for flights video. Give these credit card issuer travel portals a shot. When I searched this exact same routing through the Amex travel portal, I found the same Singapore Airlines flight for only $1,152 thanks to the International Airlines program, which discounts premium cabin fares on select airlines. But it gets better. Booking through the Amex travel portal using my Platinum card earns me 5 times points per dollar, which valued at my 2 cents per point average is like getting 10% back in value. So when factoring that in, the net cost was closer to $1,000, which is half of the other cash fares and only about double compared to one-way economy fares. Which goes to show that even as a points-focused traveler, sometimes cash is the better play, as long as you're planning and searching your options. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, what about the return leg? how are we getting home? Like I mentioned earlier, one approach I often take is booking segments separately as deals come up. So I'm still regularly searching through cash fares and award availability for this leg from Australia back home. And using the same strategy of checking just 1 to 2 months ahead, I've started to see a promising pattern. United Polaris business class flying back to California and then home for under 100,000 Aeroplan points. And if that lines up with a 20% transfer bonus, even better. Every trip like these comes with its own unique challenges, but that also means experiences and tips I can share with all of you in hopes that you can have similar experiences for yourself and your close one. Tips and secrets like from a major previous trip redemption here, or if you're just getting started building out your credit card setup, check out this video here and I'll see you in the next one.